Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Caseware webinar. Today we are looking at custom reports. So that's custom reports in the AccountsAdvanced templates. We've got up to 45 minutes available to take you through that content. As you can see there, my name's Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the education and media technicians at Caseware UK. And I'm going to be just overseeing the session today, making sure everything runs smoothly. I'll also be keeping an eye out for your questions. We'll have a look at some housekeeping in a minute on another slide. As you can see, our presenter for the content today is our education and media consultant, Phil Reeves. So I'm going to be putting your questions to him, and Phil will be giving you a demonstration of the product while taking you through the agenda. So if we jump to the next slide, we can see just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you want to submit your questions, you can use the Q&A option on the toolbar there. I'll keep an eye out for those, and we'll try and answer as many as we can during the live session. If we can't answer live, we'll get back to you afterwards. We'll also include that on a Q&A document that we'll publish on our knowledge base. We've got some time, or we've allotted some time at the end for Q&A, so we'll try and squeeze in as many questions as we can. We are recording the session, so that's going to be published to our YouTube channel, and also that will be embedded in an article on our knowledge base as well, which we'll signpost a bit later on. So I'll hand over to Phil, we'll have a look at the agenda, and we'll get started.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And yeah, as Tom mentioned, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. As Tom mentioned, today we'll be looking at custom reports, mainly focusing on the AccountsAdvanced template, but again, we'll talk about how this is applicable to some of the other templates that you can use on Caseware. So obviously, if you're an IFRS accounts producer, then this is obviously also relevant to you. As you can see on the agenda, we'll be looking at all the different aspects of creating custom reports. So how you can create them and customize them. And then ultimately, the most important part of this, I would imagine, is to get these into your sets of financial statements. So how we can build those in, where we can automate, how this will affect the reports. Again, ideally, the main reason why we would create a custom report is to, get our own information or our own, for example, our own auditors will want their own example of their audit report wording in the software. So we want to really talk about how we can get that into, for example, a custom audit report, and then make that applicable to multiple sets of accounts. So we're not having to recreate audit reports over and over again to get that information into a set of financial statements. If we're doing 50 sets, we don't want to have to keep replacing that wording each time. So by creating a custom report, we can, make that the most efficient process possible, and then make that applicable to different sets of financial statements should we need to. Now, again, these custom reports can be applicable to a multitude of different reports within Caseware. So not just audit reports, but accountants reports. There's also the option to create a custom directors report. For this session, we'll be focusing on the audit report. But again, if you have any specific questions on some of the other reports you can create, please feel free to ask. And if we've got some time at the end to answer questions on those, then we will do. But again, any questions are welcomed as we go through in today's webinar. Now, where are those custom report templates saved? So regardless of the report that we create, we want to be creating that based upon the template that we've got available within the software. So the main place for those, you can see on the screen, we've got the AccountsAdvanced template, which is FRS 101, 102, 105, and then we've got the IFRS template. Again, it is important that we go to the correct location, to the correct path within our installation of the Caseware software to pick up the right template when we're basing our reports upon these areas, to make sure that there's a lot of scripting involved in the background of these documents. And if we go essentially in and select the wrong document and base it upon the wrong starting point, then it won't read into the right template correctly. So for those producing AccountsAdvanced FRS 101, 102, 105, you want to go into the C drive, Program Files 86, Caseware Resources, Knowledge Library, and then the APP4 folder. But for those producing IFRS reports, you want to be using the IFRS folder within that knowledge base location. So a slight difference, but again, very simple to locate. And that's really where we're going to start with today's webinar. Our starting point for this session is going to be within the knowledge base, the knowledge library folder within the Caseware installation path. So if I just take a second to jump out of the slide, I will jump into our knowledge library folder. So as you can see, I'm in the C drive, program files 86, Caseware resources, knowledge library at the top of the screen. Again, important part of this process to make sure we go into the right location when we are creating these reports. So APP4, IFRS, depending on the type of financial statements you're producing. If we're opening up the IFRS, for custom audit reports, it's always the first document. These are in alphabetical order, so they all start with the letters IFRS, but then obviously audit report comes first at the top. So audit report custom, that is the document that we want to base any custom audit reports on. Now, when we're doing this, and it will be the same with the APP4 folder, we would never open this directly from this location. Again, this is a template to base our audit report on. So we always want to make sure we take a copy of this document, or from the perspective of AccountsAdvanced, to be going to APP4. And we want to make sure, if we scroll down slightly more searching involved in this, but again, you Control F if you want to, and locate the audit report custom document. Similarly, there's an ACC report custom document for the accountant's report. And again, very similar to what we mentioned with the IFRS template. When we're creating these, we want to make sure we take a copy of this document. We don't want to use this one. We want to take a copy of it and use that as the basis for our custom report. So if I go back to Knowledge Library, once we've taken a copy of that document, we want to go to, let me just double check I took a copy of that, right click and copy. And once we've taken a copy of that, we want to go back to the Knowledge Library folder and open up this custom area. And within custom, this is where we'll locate any custom content that gets created within Caseware. So audit reports, custom reports within the financial statements. For those who've used Note Builder before, any Note Builder notes are also located in this area. So we've got custom audit report. Also within here, you'll find the custom DIR report, DIR standing for Director's Report, copy and paste. So again, there is a document within here on many installations where you can use this as the basis for a custom director's report. Again, should you want to produce a standardized director's report across multiple sets of financial statements. So once we've done this, we can right click and we can rename this if we want to. There's no real requirement to, but again, if you're making multiple reports or for multiple different sets of accounts, or you're doing 101s, 102s, 105s, and you're creating these for the different types of, probably less 105, but for the different types of reporting standards, then again, you may want to rename this. So I might want to call this, FRS 101 report or custom report or something like that. It's important that we don't get rid of the corp and the slash alongside that, but you can rename the rest of it as much as you want. Once we've done that, we can then open it and start to begin editing and building our custom report. Now, you'll be always, when you first copy this over, you'll be met with this update window. Always click OK to this. A couple of background freeze cells. These cells that you don't really see are included as part of this process. So we want to make sure we include those or take those updates at that moment in time. Obviously, not the end of the world if we don't. We can always close and reopen the window and it'll ask us to take those updates again. Now, when we are creating our report, this is the starting point for any custom audit report. Again, we'll focus on the audit report today because it gives us a general overview of the different options that we have when we're producing these reports. For this example, I've got a Word document I'm going to build into custom report. But again, as a starting point, we're met with a signature section at the bottom and then this guidance information at the top of the screen. Now, important thing to note, we should never remove the signature section at the bottom of this report. So everything where I've got Caseware UK and I've got an address below, we should never remove this. This is pulling directly from the wizard document. So if you've opened up this custom report outside of a set of financial statements, which is completely plausible, I've got my accounts open at the same time, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this wouldn't automatically update. So it would have the cells there, but we wouldn't be able to see the information within them. So what we don't want you to do is, there's say, for example, there's an empty cell there. I'll just delete that because I don't need that. You will need that to populate the signature section at the bottom of the screen, to populate the address at the bottom of the screen, the auditor that's signing the audit report. So that all pulls through directly within the bottom of our custom report. Now, the rest of this is giving us some guidance on styles. Styles are an important part of the audit report, because what you'll find is that just because you're copying information across from Word or from another, from PDF, or depending on how you receive this audit report wording, just because you're copying it across from a source doesn't mean that the styles that get picked up from that source will be the same within the Caseware software. So first things first, when we're doing this, just so I bring it up on my screen, this is the audit report wording I'm going to copy across. So it's just some basic wording that I've basically taken from an example set of financial statements, and I'm going to bring this across into Caseware. So first things first to do this is my recommendation is we make some working space for us to copy this wording into. So as you can see, I've selected on the last return at the bottom of this section, and all I'm going to do is press enter just to create myself some working space to copy this information into. Again, I'm not going to touch the signature section at the bottom. I'm only going to work in this area at the top. Now, you can keep this guidance and leave it in there till the end, but you can also remove it. Ultimately, it is up to you. And just on one note, if you do remove it, always make sure you also delete this last return that you get at the top of the screen. So this is all to do with styles, which we'll come back to in a second. But at the moment, this style is picking up as normal. No standard text within Caseware we use a normal style. So we always want to make sure we delete that as well. Now, obviously, copying text in is pretty self-explanatory. It's the same as you've ever copied text into anything in the world. You Control C, you go to your report, you paste that in. Now, first things first, when we're looking at this, there's a couple of things on styles that we need to look at when we're building this in. As I said, styles are an integral part of the report, because at the moment I'm looking at this and I'm saying, actually, that looks exactly how I want it to look when I build into the financial statements. My opinion is in bold. The text is all in the correct styles. I've got my bullet points in there underneath these bullet points areas at the bottom. Perfect. But actually what you'll find when you build these into the financial statements is that there won't be the bullet points that we need. This style will actually revert back to just being standard text. And the reason for that is, if you look on the left-hand side, the style being picked up on all of these lines is exactly the same. So one thing to be aware of when you're looking at this report is that you really need to make sure that you get the right styles in the right places. So first thing to look at once you copy text in is the styles. At the top of the screen here, you can see the styles option. Now, wherever I click on this report at the moment, the style is always the same, text standard input. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the accounts, text standard input is basically all these little green text areas at the top of the screen or throughout the financial statements. These are all text standard input areas where we can manually insert text into the financial statements. Now, for our report, we want this to be bold, for example, which means that we really need to look at the style that's being applied into this section. So to do that, we can use this drop down at the top of the screen. And for any subheadings, we need to either use the text subhead or the text subhead input style. Both of them work. The obvious difference between the two is one will let you input text at a later point, whereas the other one will lock that text down once you build it into the financial statements. So regardless which one you use, ultimately it's up to you. If you know you're going to need to overtype that text at some point in the future, then you want to use text subhead input. If you don't, then text subhead will work. So first things first, check the styles. So making sure that the headings are bold. So I've got basis of opinion down here, as you can see. Again, that needs to be made bold. So I go to the top and I go text subhead. And you can see that the styles bar on the left-hand side will indicate that the style was changed just on that line. Okay. So first thing to look at, styles. The second thing when we're looking at the style of the information on the document itself is the bullet points. So when we're looking at bullet points, and again, bullet points are an integral part of any real report. We often find that the opinion section will have our opinion will be bullet pointed in this area. So again, we want to make sure we pull the bullet points in correctly. Now, the bullet point styles that are included within Word are different from the bullet point styles that are included within Caseware. So if I try to build this in, sorry, the bullet points are going to be included within this report are going to differ from the bullet points that are going to be included, not just within the rest of the report, but the rest of the financial statements. So the spacing is slightly smaller. It won't be consistent with the rest of the financial statements where there are other bullet points that are being included. And also, in some cases, it just doesn't pull the bullet point through because it doesn't recognize the bullet points from Word. So first things first, we'll want a backspace to remove that existing bullet point. Now, if I click on this one down here, you'll notice that the bullet point button at the top of the screen is selected, which indicates that it's just building in a standard bullet point. That is not the case. It's building in a bullet point, but it's based upon the ones in Word, as I've already mentioned. So what we want to do if we want to put a bullet point in, if we click this button at the top, the bullet point button, it will add a bullet point in, but Caseware remembers the bullet points from Word. So if I click this, it just adds the same bullet point back in. So what you want to make sure you do for the purpose of adding bullet points is go to this button here, which is the multi-level list button. Click on here, and then you'll have the option to select bullets. Now, the important part in this is not just selecting bullets. That will load a bullet point in absolutely fine. But again, to make sure this is consistent with the rest of the financial statements, the bullet point you add in needs to have a text indent of 0.4. The 0.25 is the bullet point indent for Microsoft Word. But again, we want to make sure this is consistent with the rest of the financial statements. So our text indent will be 0.4. We then press apply. And as you can see, this now has a slightly larger indent than the rest of the bullet points. This one follows the rest of the Caseware file. Now, I could go through and keep using this button to add the additional bullet points in, but as a quick way to do it, we backspace, and we backspace. So now they're all part of the same bullet point. We reselect enter, and then we add a new bullet point into that space, and it continues the style of the existing bullet point. So just to repeat that, we basically make this bullet point part of the existing bullet point number 2 by backspacing, and then we press enter to add our new bullet point in. The other thing to be aware of when you're doing this is just right click, and if I go to paragraph, you just want to make sure that these first line and left line are both 0.00. In some instances, when you copy text in from certain, especially from PDF, the indent may be slightly different to what you are required to include when you are building this report. So it could be 0.4, for example, which if I just show you very quickly, as you can see, means that the bullet point has a slightly different indent. So make sure that's always 0.0. Similarly, if the first line is 0.4, again, make sure that's 0.0, and that will have the correct alignment in there. So first thing, as I mentioned, checking styles, making sure the bullet points are correct. Again, what you'll find is that if I try to add another, say I needed another bullet point down here, when I go to the multi-level list and click bullets, Caseware remembers that the text indent is 0.4. So that now becomes the norm for bullet points in the future. Now, once we've done that, the next thing we might want to look to do when we're building these custom reports, once we've got the styles in, is to look at the automation of the report. Now, again, one of the things I mentioned at the start is that the idea of building a custom report is to make it applicable to different sets of financial statements. Now, because of that, ideally, we want to automate things like the name of the company. We want to automate things like the year-end date. We might want to automate things like the we up here or the word directors and things like that. And that information can be automated using some of the basic features that are built into the Caseware audit reports and some of the other reports that Caseware has available as well. So if I want to automate the name of the company, I can insert a cell to do that. Now, to do that, what Caseware has built into the report is some guidance at the top of the screen. So this question mark icon has an option to view a selection of sample cells to copy where live references are desired. So if I click on this drop down here, you can see some of the live references that we can include in our report by default. So for example, the name of the company, RS Transport Limited. We can pre-populate the year-end date over here. We've got an example over here. We've got, even as I said, the words I, we, my, our, the word year we can automate as well. So if it was period instead of year, that would again automate within our report. So there's all sorts of things that we can automate. I'm not going to go through them all, but just as an example, for example, say I want to put the name of the company in, and automate that so I can apply it to different sets of accounts. All I need to do on the custom report is go to the insert button and create a new cell. Now, when you create this new cell, the first thing you're asked for is a cell number. That cell number just needs to be the corresponding cell number in this table here. So the cell number for the name of the company is cust client. So all I do is copy that. Caseware will turn the cell number red. What that indicates is that cell already exists within this specific report. And we know it exists because we've got that in example up here. So when I click OK, it will say to me that already exists. I click OK to this. And as you can see, the calculated value is the name of the company. Now, the benefit of doing this is if I go back into working papers, I go to engagement properties and I make a change to the name of this company. So just for the sake of argument, we're going to call it Elvstrom Limited. Click OK. You can see the name of that automatically changes within our report. So we can apply it to different sets of accounts should we need to. So just to reiterate that process of creating a cell, if I was doing one for the year end date, I go Control and L. And if I just move this, got to cancel this very quickly. You can see I want to use cust CYN for this. So Control and L, cust CYN. That cell already exists. So I click OK. Control and L can also be used, as a shortcut, as opposed to going to insert and selecting the cell button at the top of the screen. Click OK, and that creates our new cell again. And again, I can use it every time I want the year-end date. So down here where I've also got a reference to the year-end date, go up to the cell button, cust CYN, click OK again. And again, I've got my calculated value here. That calculates automatically from the engagement properties window. So the more that you can automate, the more that you can automatically pull into the report, the easier it's going to be to then apply that to different sets of financial statements. We don't need to go through the process of, manually populating, manually updating each time, making sure that it's updated every single time we build a new set of financial statements. The other thing that you can do, just very quickly, through the question mark icon, is there's examples of page numbers that we can add into the report as well. So we can also add page numbers, page breaks in there. For example, examples of the end of the balance sheets, or the balance sheet pages, the notes pages, things like that. So we can actually automate some other areas of the report as well. But again, those examples can be seen within the question mark icon. Now, obviously, at this point, I'd need to go back into my report and build the rest of this in. But again, that's pretty self-explanatory, copy and paste, and then making sure we select the right styles. Remember, you can go to the print preview at any point to see what that will look like. The only thing it won't include is the heading at the top of the screen. So obviously, that's part of the accounts document as opposed to being a part of the custom audit report. So you can't see the headings, but you can see what the actual report will look like in terms of its style. That's starting to look roughly like how I would want it to look within the financial statements. So at this stage, I can save this. Now, in terms of distribution of this report, I need to send it to my colleague Tom, who's also working on a set of financial statements. All I need to do is locate, again, the C drive program files 86, Caseware resources, knowledge library custom folder. And from here, all I need to do is take a copy of this report and either put it into a shared location or send it to Tom via, whatever, email, Teams, whatever I want to use to get that across to Tom. The important part of this is that Tom would then need to take a copy of that report and place it into the same location within his installation of Caseware. So again, within the C drive program files 86, Caseware resources, knowledge library custom, he will have his own custom folder within there that he'll need to copy this report into. What that does is it creates two versions of the same report. So any changes that I make will not obviously correspond onto the changes that Tom could potentially make. So we're creating multiple versions of the same report. Obviously, if I then make changes, I'll just have to send a new version of that to Tom to then update his custom folder as well. In terms of getting that into the financial statements, it's very straightforward. There's a couple of steps we need to follow. And it really depends on whether we're going to have this applied across multiple sets of accounts or just across one. So firstly, I will go back to working papers. I'll close the report. So I want to replace the default audit report that Caseware has within the software. So first things first, what I'll need to do is go into my system and tell Caseware that that custom report exists and also that I want to use it on my financial statements. So to do that, I need to go to the other docs within the digital dashboard. Now, if you don't have the AccountsAdvanced dashboard as your default because of the fact that you are, you're doing audits as well, so you're using the audit dashboard, you can access the computer settings area, which we're going to access via the auditors tab within the wizard as well by clicking on firm addresses. So the area that we need to access is our computer settings. So on the dashboard, I can go to other docs and I can select computer settings. Now, what we're doing within the computer settings is, as I mentioned, we're telling Caseware that this custom report exists. And we also have the option to tell Caseware that we want that to be the default within our financial statements. Now, again, this is only my computer settings. It doesn't affect anyone else within the company. It only affects my installation of Caseware. So within here, I have the option for custom library files. And we can see some examples of some of the custom reports that we can build. We talked about directors reports, we got accountants reports, we got audit reports in there. We got trustees reports from the charity and academy side. The only one that isn't relevant now is directors responsibility statement. So that is a legacy option that was available on our old accounts templates that haven't really been used for a few years now. So if we try and use that, it won't load into the financial statements, but the rest are absolutely fine. So from an audit report perspective, firstly, I need to tell Caseware, yes, I've got a custom library. I need to turn it on. Then I need to tell Caseware what the custom library file is that I want to pick up. So I click here to select a custom knowledge library, and I need to locate that custom knowledge library. So I go to the C drive, program files 86, and I go to Caseware. I can go to my resources folder, knowledge library, custom, and within here, I can go to my custom library file. So I select the custom library file. That now Caseware is able to identify that that exists. Now, if I'm going to make that, if I want that to be the default, so I want that to be the audit report that Caseware will automatically load into the software every single time I create a new file, I want to tick the box on the left-hand side. That produces the arrow, which then makes that the default item. If I can't deselect that, the only way to get rid of it is to click on here, delete it, and then reload it again. So it's up to you whether you make it the default. It's not a requirement, but again, it does make it the automatic audit report within the file as opposed to the default one. Now, in this file specifically, I've already got the standard audit report in the software. So when I click close to this, I go back to the accounts. I've loaded in that custom report, but this set of financial statements is still got the standard report in here. This is just a standard Caseware audit report. As you can see, I haven't copied all the text into my custom one, so we know it's the standard one. And the reason why it's still the standard one is because even though, and if I go to the accounts prep, it'll identify that the default is the custom one, I need to take an update before it will then load in that custom report. So to take the update, you either select this little C icon and then reselect the custom library file, or you close and reopen the accounts, which will check for updates as well. I'll do it this way because it's the quicker way to do it. But do we want to replace this? We say yes. It will say OK to update the section. So I'll click OK, and then I'll be prompted for an update to my audit report. So if you close and reopen the accounts, it will again prompt you for an update to the audit report. So we give that a second to run through the update process, execute the script. That's now executed. I can tell because at the bottom left-hand side, it says ready. I double click on here And as you can see, my custom report is now starting to load in. I've got my automatic cell for Elstrom for the year ends here. This is put through the correct style because I changed that style to text subhead. You can always check the styles by going to the style option at the top on the toolbar and then clicking anywhere in the accounts and double selecting this option here, and it will tell you what style is being picked up. And if I go to preview, we can see that report is being built in. The same process can be used for the accountant's report. You just need to make sure you use that ACT report file that we saw within the custom folder as a starting point. Similar process for the IFRS set of accounts. And then also, again, if you're doing director's report, you want to take a copy of that director's report file that is available already within the custom folder on your installation of Caseware. Okay. At this stage, I will hand back to Tom to see if we've got any questions that have come through.
Thanks, Phil. We've had a question come through, but I think it's something that will be probably be handing over to our product team for comment or for a request for an enhancement. But I will read it out to you. So is it possible for Caseware to update the properties behind the custom cells? For example, the cust client has not been set up for wrapping, so presumably wrapping of text. If it's longer than the length of the cell. In this instance, I have to create a USX cell and add the calculation CLP2, which picks up the company name. I then edit the formatting to allow wrapping. Not sure if you've got any insight into wrapping or predefined properties behind wrapping of cells, or if that is something we need to forward to our product team.
It would be something that we need to forward because basically what we're doing, just for everyone else, the question that is being asked is to do with the fact that this cell within the custom report, if I go back in, the cell within this custom report has set properties. So I can't go into the cell itself without going into the background, which our development team can do. So that has set properties, which means that there's a set limit to the size of that cell.
Sorry, Phil, I'm not sure if we're not seeing your...
Oh, sorry, there we go.
Thank you.
Pause the screen. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, so this cell on the screen has a set size. So if the name of the company goes beyond that size, then obviously, as has been mentioned, there's the only real option is to then create our own custom cell within here. So it's something that we will need to raise with our product team to get them to reduce or not necessarily increase, but to have it as a variable cell, which means that the size of the cell will increase and decrease depending on the information. And then, as you say, having wrapping on it will ensure that what you might find in some circumstances, if the name of the company spreads too far along this line, then it will automatically push that cell down into the next line. But again, you can create your own custom cell. So a custom cell to create just very quickly would be to go to the insert cell button. And rather than using one of the default lines that Caseware has, we would create a custom cell by using the USX notion. The reason why we use USX as a cell number is because it differs from the standard cells within Caseware. So we would do this, then we would go okay, and then we would put, we could put cust client in here, which would pull through the same name, or the calculation that's being used in that cell is CLP2, which again, as mentioned in the question, is the default cell reference for the name of the company. If I click on here, you can see it's CLP2. So we'd have to do it as a custom cell, as mentioned, but we'll raise that with product. I'll speak to the developers and ask them if it should be quite a simple fix for us, but we'll look into that. But there is that workaround if we need to produce our own custom cells.
Thanks very much, and we've got a thanks as well. So we'll get back to you as soon as we can with an update on that question. So that is actually all of the questions we've got at the moment. Okay. So we'll go through the wrap up. We'll go through the slides. You can continue to use that Q&A option as we go through that wrap up there. So please do. You'll also receive a link to a survey after the webinar. We'd very much appreciate your feedback. You'll also have an opportunity there to submit any additional queries, and also you can add in some topics that you'd like us to cover in future sessions. So that's the Q&A option just there. If we jump to the next slide, Just a reminder, really, of our usual home for our webinar listings. We are working on our webinar schedule at the moment. So if you keep an eye on the events section of well, it's under resources. So if you go to caseware.com/UK, resources at the top, and then you'll see that we have an events section there. And you'll see all of our upcoming sessions populate as we add them. So keep an eye on that page there. Jumping to the next slide, just some plugs for a couple of sets of resources. So you may be aware that we have a LinkedIn page, which is Client Services, Caseware UK Client Services, or Client Services Caseware UK Limited, even the other way around. And that's our LinkedIn page there for signposting upcoming sessions. Also, any timely links to articles. So, for example, during Academy season, we would be signposting Academy articles. We usually run a Company's House webinar in the autumn, and we'd be signposting additional resources for that. So if you follow us there, then you'll be kept up to date with all of the latest news within the UK business. As you can see, we've also got a YouTube channel there. That's where we've got lots of videos that are split into playlists, quick vids mainly, but we also have a webinar playlist, and this webinar recording is going to find its way onto there. And also that'll be linked on an article on our knowledge base, which we'll signpost in a sec. So talking of which, if we jump to the next slide there, our knowledge base has moved. We're calling it knowledge base again. So for a little while, we had our help site, which is still running. We'll still be running for a little bit longer, but we have moved our knowledge base to this address here. So if you go to my.caseware.com, there is a knowledge base option at the top. I believe Phil has this open just to show you a quick example of where to find your articles. So yes, thanks, Phil. So as you can see, so my.caseware.com, and then you've got the knowledge base option at the top. As with the help site, you don't need to log in, so you can view all of our guidance there. There is content behind a login, for example, downloads, but for your guidance and for things like webinar recordings and associated material, no need to log in there. And really, the main piece of advice is to pay attention to the tick boxes on the left. So all your filters there will help you get to where you need to go. So we've pre-selected webinars. This is a global knowledge base as well. So there are different territories that have different content. So for example, our colleagues in North America will have their own content that may not apply to you. So you can use your territories on the left-hand side there to narrow it down to the UK content. And further down, we have the option to filter by product. So we have had a quick question come in while we were going through that information there, which is, with bullet points, can you have them indent rather than starting at the same line as the paragraph above? I'm not sure if you want to quickly have a look at that one, Phil. We've got a few minutes to go.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so you can do. Well, I right-clicked and I mentioned within the webinar to be wary of the spacing. If I go to paragraph up here and I say first line, for example, 0.4, then that would indent that. So you can either have it like this, where it's slightly indented from the paragraph above. If I go to paragraph and say left 0.4, then that would also allow you to, you can chop and change with the indents as you please. So I can have it like this, where if I have just to the left as 0.4, you can have it so the first line is 0.4, which again will increase the spacing from the left-hand side. So again, that's right-click, go to paragraph. And if you do just the first line, then as we saw a moment ago, the 0.4 will wrap just the first line, and then all the others will start in line with the bullet point. If you do paragraph and change just to the left and then remove the first line, then that will wrap that will move everything across so that everything has that slight indent. So just compare that. If I go to print preview, you can see that's more indented than it is for the rest of the bullet points. So it's just by right-clicking and changing it on the paragraph itself. Right-click paragraph and just making amendments to the first line and the left line. But ultimately, it's up to you how it looks. It's your audit report, so you can put whatever spacing you want in there.
Thanks, Phil. So I think we can jump back. I'll say we can jump back to the slides. I think we've just got the end slide now, but we can have a look at it. Just why not? So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Keep an eye out for any future sessions that we have on our website will also notify you of the availability of the recording, so you can watch it again and share it with people that were unable to attend, and any follow-ups to any questions as well. Thanks very much for joining us again. Thanks, Phil. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you, everyone.